A sliver of dying light bled through the broken window of our ramshackle tool shed, barely illuminating the dust swirling in the damp air. The rain pounded on the tin roof in a relentless rhythm, like a war drum set to drive me into a corner. I pressed my back against a stack of rotted wooden crates, hoping to become invisible. My heart was slamming against my ribcage, each beat louder than the last. Footsteps crunched across the gravel outside. I caught the silhouette of my father, Alfred Price, looming in the doorframe. The lightning behind him turned his figure into a menacing shadow, and for a second I thought he was some kind of monster conjured by the storm. Maybe he was, in a way. I clutched my arms over my head as he stepped inside, slamming the shed door shut. The flicker of the single overhead bulb revealed every angry line on his face. He was gripping a worn leather belt, his belt, and he whipped it through the air so hard I heard it crack. "You think you can raise a hand to your own brother, Joel?" Alfred snarled. Water dripped from his jacket onto the dirt floor, forming dark puddles around his boots. "You freak, you worthless little freak!" I swallowed, trying not to let his words cut deeper than the belt soon would. My body ached in places I didn't even know existed, thanks to my older brother, Gavin, and his latest round of hazing at school. When he slapped me in front of his buddies, I'd finally snapped and swung back. Maybe I landed a lucky punch I didn't remember. All I knew was that Gavin had gone crying to Dad, and now here we were. "Dad, I didn't mean to," I said, my voice shaky, but there was no chance to finish. Alfred raised the belt and brought it down with a swift motion. Pain exploded across my shoulder. My vision blurred, tears mixing with sweat. I stumbled, nearly knocking over a can of motor oil. The rancid smell clung to my nostrils, turning my stomach. He struck again, this time slicing across my forearm as I tried to shield myself. I let out a yelp and tripped, banging against the crates. The overhead light flickered. Maybe the rain was shorting our old wiring, or maybe the universe was simply winking at me, telling me to get out. Alfred's face twisted in rage. "You think you can embarrass your brother? You're not even my—" He choked on the words, as if something held his throat. I'd heard rumors all my life, that I wasn't really his son, that I was some fluke with arms too long and hair too dark, but hearing his resentment firsthand never got easier. "Dad!" I cried, backing up. My feet squelched in muddy footprints on the shed floor. "Stop, please!" The next crack of the belt sent agony searing through my leg. I collapsed, tasting copper as I bit my lip too hard. "You're not going to talk your way out of this," he hissed. He towered over me, breathing heavily like a bull about to charge. The rain outside swelled to a roar, drowning out my whimper. I knew if I didn't do something, I might never stand again. A flash of lightning revealed a rusty kerosene lamp on the work table just behind him. Summoning what little strength I had, I lurched upward, seizing the lamp and swinging it blindly. The glass struck his arm, forcing him to recoil. A startled grunt escaped him as he staggered back against a shelf, knocking loose a tangle of rope and old tools. Time seemed to freeze. His belt fell to the ground with a dull thud. He locked eyes with me, fury dancing in his pupils. "You little—" I didn't wait to hear more. My entire body screamed in pain, but adrenaline pushed me forward. I scrambled around him, yanking the door open. Rain blasted my face as I bolted outside. Mud sloshed around my sneakers, the clouds above swirling in a blackened sky. My lungs burned as I gulped the cold, wet air. Alfred stumbled out after me, shouting curses that were lost in the thunder. I sprinted across our backyard, vaulting over a low fence in pure desperation. My mind reeled with images of Dad's hatred, Gavin's smug face, and the shame I'd carried for so long. I didn't care about the water soaking me to the bone. I just wanted out. Headlights flickered down the road, maybe a neighbor driving past. I considered flagging them for help, but thought better of it. Dad had a way of twisting stories to his favor, and I knew I couldn't rely on anyone else's kindness. Not here, anyway. Instead, I kept running, my shoes slapping against wet pavement. My muscles flared in protest. The storm hissed like an angry serpent, spitting rain in my eyes. But nothing would stop me from getting to the one place he couldn't follow tonight, the police station in town. I glanced behind me, half expecting Alfred to appear out of nowhere. But all I saw was darkness. Maybe he'd given up, or maybe he was planning something worse. My heart hammered at the thought. I bit down on my lip, focusing on each stride. I would report him my own father for assault. That idea used to terrify me, but now it was my only hope. Lightning cleaved the sky above, momentarily lighting my path. I won't let him do this to me again, I told myself between ragged breaths. Never again. And so I ran through the storm, ignoring the sting of fresh bruises, ignoring the hot tears spilling down my cheeks. With every step, a sliver of determination cracked through my fear. This was the night everything changed. The next morning, my whole world felt numb, except for the dull throbbing in my shoulder and legs, reminders of the shed. I was sitting on a battered metal chair inside the cramped lobby of the local police station, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. My clothes were still damp from the night before, but at least I was safe here. I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the glass window near the front desk. A bruise was blooming across my cheek, and a thin line of dried blood ran from my temple to my jaw. I looked like a lost kid in a bad action movie. Joel Price? A uniformed officer called my name from behind a half-open door. I stood, wincing at the ache in my ribs, and stepped forward. Inside the office, a middle-aged officer named Sergeant Bailey gave me a long, sympathetic look. "Son, we're going to need a formal statement," he said gently. I nodded, still fighting the urge to flinch every time an adult moved too quickly around me. I recounted the events in the tool shed, how Dad had whipped me with a belt, how I'd escaped. My voice cracked, and I swallowed hard to stay calm. Sergeant Bailey typed furiously on a keyboard. Once I finished, he leaned back with a sigh. "Your father, Alfred Price, was detained last night," Bailey explained, removing his reading glasses. "He won't be released until the judge decides on charges." He paused, as if searching for the right words. "I'm sorry you had to go through that." I wasn't sure what to say. A strange mix of relief and guilt churned in my stomach. Despite everything, he was still my father. Another officer escorted me to an adjoining corridor, just as a familiar figure bustled in my Aunt Marilyn. She wore a floral scarf around her neck and clutched a purse tight against her side, her eyes scanning anxiously. The moment she spotted me, she practically ran over. "Oh, Joel!" she cried, pulling me into a careful hug, mindful of my bruises. She smelled like lavender and peppermint, a strange but comforting combination. "Are you okay? I got here as soon as I could." I nodded against her shoulder. Words failed me, but tears threatened again. Aunt Marilyn smoothed down my hair. "It's all right. I'll take care of you." Sergeant Bailey approached, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we'll need your signature on some documents. Then the boy can go home with you." He glanced between us. "Temporary protective order is in place. Alfred Price must stay 100 yards away from Joel until the court hearing." Aunt Marilyn's lips tightened. "Understood." She cast a worried look my way. "Don't worry, Joel. We'll figure out what's next." 10 minutes later, we were sitting in her old hatchback. Rain still pattered on the windshield, but the storm had calmed to a gray drizzle. I sank into the seat, exhaustion dragging at my eyelids. Aunt Marilyn started the car, heater blasting lukewarm air. How's Mom?" I asked quietly. Marilyn glanced at me with pity. "She's upset, but well, your dad always had a temper. I'm sure she feels guilty." She navigated onto the main road, passing the silent storefronts of our small town. "Your sister Iris wanted to come, but I told her to stay at home for now. Gavin is nowhere to be found." My stomach twisted. That name. Gavin. The cause of this whole nightmare. But I knew he wasn't the real cause Dad was. Dad and his unshakable belief that I wasn't part of the family. Marilyn must have sensed my turmoil. She reached over and gently squeezed my uninjured shoulder. "I can take you in, Joel. My house isn't big, but there's a spare bedroom. I'm not letting you face him again. At least not until the court figures this out." Relief washed over me like a warm tide. "Thank you," I murmured. Her lips curved in a sad smile. I wish I could have stepped in sooner. We drove in a tense silence, broken only by the hiss of tires on wet pavement. As the town's outskirts gave way to a rural stretch of farmland, Aunt Marilyn cleared her throat. "Joel, I know you've had it rough, but I want you to focus on your future, okay? Finish school, figure out what you really love." She threw me a sidelong glance. You always mention something about lifting weights, boxing? A faint spark lit inside me. Yeah, I like the idea of controlling my own strength, I admitted. I guess I want to not feel so helpless anymore. She nodded. Good. Let's explore that. It might be good for you. And for the first time since I'd bolted from our backyard shed, I felt a slight flicker of hope. The bruises would heal. My father's anger might never change, but I could. Maybe living with Aunt Marilyn was the second chance I needed to claim a life that I truly wanted. A week later, I found myself stepping through the doors of Elm Creek High, the school near Aunt Marilyn's neighborhood. It wasn't huge by any means, just a single two-story building flanked by a muddy soccer field, but compared to the chaos I'd left behind, it felt like a fresh start. My body still complained when I moved too quickly. Beneath my hoodie, fading bruises mapped my torso like some twisted reminder of Dad's rage, but I tried to channel that hurt into purpose. If I walked these halls with my head high, maybe no one would see the battered kid I used to be. Right away, my homeroom teacher, Mr. Ferris, noticed my transfer papers. Welcome, Joel, he greeted in a warm voice. We're a bit late in the semester, but I'm sure you'll catch up fine. He handed me a small packet, class schedule, locker info, a campus map. If you have any trouble, come talk to me. I nodded, offering a quiet thanks. The notion of an adult actually willing to help without yelling was comforting. Despite the usual stares that come with being the new kid, no one shoved me into a locker or hurled insults. In my old place, I'd become a target for Gavin's jock buddies. Here, people mostly kept to themselves. After lunch, I slipped into the library to find a quiet corner and go through my assignments. The library smelled of old paper and disinfectant, oddly soothing. As I browsed the shelves, I spotted a flyer pinned to a bulletin board. Wrestling team tryouts next week. I traced my fingers across the word wrestling. Aunt Marilyn's voice echoed in my head. You always mentioned boxing, lifting weights. My arms were still too skinny for my liking, but maybe a structured team sport could toughen me up, or at least help me forget everything that happened. A cough came from behind me. I turned to see a tall guy with sandy hair, wearing a varsity jacket. He eyed me curiously. You thinking about trying out? He asked, nodding at the flyer. Maybe, I said, pretending confidence. My bruises protested as I shifted my backpack, but I forced a grin. I used to do a bit of boxing at my old school. The guy smiled, friendly enough. Well, I'm Bryce, captain of the wrestling team. If you need tips, let me know. He handed me a small card with a phone number. We're always looking for dedicated members. Give me a shout. I thanked him, a strange wave of relief flooding me. Not everyone here was an enemy. Maybe I could carve out a space for myself. I pocketed the card and decided I'd definitely show up for the tryouts, even if I was still battered. That afternoon, I caught a ride home with Aunt Marilyn, who had just finished her part-time shift at the local library. She asked a dozen questions about my first day. Did I meet anyone interesting? How were the classes? Did I feel safe? School's fine, I replied, gazing out the window at rows of small houses. I might try out for wrestling next week. She tapped the steering wheel thoughtfully. That's great, Joel. Physical exercise can be therapeutic. Just be careful with those bruises. I nodded. I will. Later, as we sat at the kitchen table for dinner, grilled cheese and tomato soup, Aunt Marilyn slid a stack of brochures toward me. They were from local gyms, community centers, even a dance studio. Take your pick, she said. Boxing, lifting, maybe even some dancing to help with coordination. I'm not sure, but these might help you find your footing again. A pang of gratitude hit me. She hardly knew my day-to-day struggles, but she was trying. Thanks, I mumbled, flipping through them. They looked so hopeful. Pictures of smiling folks punching bags, a big weight room with rows of equipment. Maybe a life beyond the shadow of my father's anger was truly possible. An ache in my side reminded me not to dream too big too fast. But if there was one thing I'd learned from that night in the shed, it was that I couldn't stay a victim forever. I had to build my own strength physically, mentally, in any way I could. So I made a quiet promise to myself. I'd excel in school, I'd get strong, and I'd never let another man, father or not, beat me down again. The vow settled in my chest like an ember. waiting to be stoked into flame. In the months that followed, life at Aunt Marilyn's house settled into a steady routine. I joined the wrestling team, lifting modest weights after practice. My bruises healed, though faint scars sometimes reminded me how fragile safety could be. Still, each day felt more hopeful than the last. I'd gotten used to the crisp morning air of her neighborhood and older development lined with elm trees. We'd leave early. I'd catch the bus to school while Aunt Marilyn headed to her part-time work. Some afternoons, she'd pick me up if I stayed late for practice. We'd chat about everything except Alfred, Gavin, and the toxic environment I'd escaped. Silence on that topic was our unspoken truce. But one gray winter afternoon, everything changed. I was sitting in geometry class when the school receptionist knocked on the door, her gaze flicking worriedly to me. My chest tightened as she murmured something to the teacher, who then beckoned me to step outside. I followed, heart pounding. In the hallway, Aunt Marilyn's friend, Miss Harlow, stood wringing her hands. She swallowed hard before speaking. "Joel, honey, something happened to your aunt. They found her collapsed at the library. The ambulance took her to St. Mercy Hospital." My mind raced with disbelief. Aunt Marilyn had been fine. She'd just driven me to school that morning. Without thinking, I dropped my backpack and bolted. Miss Harlow offered me a ride. The drive to the hospital was a blur of fear and dread. When we arrived, a hushed nurse led me down a sterile corridor that smelled of disinfectant and anxiety. A doctor approached with a grave expression. "She suffered a severe stroke," he said gently. "We did everything we could. Everything we could." My stomach twisted into knots. "No," I whispered. "She was healthy." "I'm sorry," the doctor replied, voice somber. "She passed away a short while ago." It felt as if the floor vanished beneath me. Aunt Marilyn gone? I'd only just started to feel normal in her home, safe with her. Now the anchor holding me steady was cut loose, and I was drifting again. The next days were a fog of funeral arrangements and condolences from people I barely recognized. Mom called once, crying softly, and insisted I move back home. But the protective order against Dad was still in place, and the mere idea of living under that roof paralyzed me. I avoided her calls after that. The funeral was small, just immediate friends and a few extended family members. Iris wanted to come, but Dad forbade it. Gavin never even reached out. I stood at the graveside in a borrowed black suit, cold wind biting my cheeks. Marilyn's casket descended into the ground, and I felt like I was being buried alongside her. 2 days later, I found myself in the office of Aunt Marilyn's lawyer, Mr. Caldwell, a gray-haired man with a kindly demeanor. He opened a folder labeled with her name. "Marilyn Price left a valid will," he explained softly. "She's bequeathed her house, its contents, and a small amount of savings to you, Joel. Additionally, there are some shares in your father's construction firm collateral from an old loan. He never repaid her." Confusion and grief swirled in my mind. "But I'm only 16, I muttered. Caldwell nodded. "A trustee will manage assets until you turn 18, but effectively, this property is yours to live in if you wish." I stared at the papers. It was surreal. The modest bungalow, that little patch of normalcy, belonged to me now. My heart twisted with sorrow and a flicker of gratitude. Aunt Marilyn had thought of everything, even after she was gone. Over the next week, I gathered my belongings from her house, my house, now, and tried to piece together a plan. I was determined not to let Dad's bitterness overshadow the final gift Aunt Marilyn had given me: freedom, plus a chance for a future on my own terms. A letter arrived from my high school counselor. I had been recommended for a scholarship to a nearby college's early business program. My test scores were high enough. If I finished my last year strong, I could secure a place. The news felt like a lifeline. Maybe this was the path forward Aunt Marilyn had nudged me toward: higher education, away from the toxicity of my family. I pressed the acceptance letter to my chest, blinking back tears. "I'll do it," I whispered into the emptiness of the living room. "I'll make you proud, Aunt Marilyn." Standing there in the silent house, I realized I'd stepped into adulthood prematurely, but not without resources. A fire sparked in me once more. I would honor Marilyn's memory. I'd protect what she left behind and shape a future that was truly mine, starting with that scholarship and a promise. No one would break me again. A gentle breeze swept across the campus lawns as Joel Price stepped out of his final evening class, a worn gym bag slung over one shoulder. Students lounged under the old oaks, some tapping on laptops, others engaged in lively debate about upcoming exams. Joel felt a pang of gratitude just being here. This was the fresh start he'd dreamed of when he was living with Aunt Marilyn. He inhaled deeply, recalling the mixture of adrenaline and determination that had carried him through the last year. Between acceptance into the business and management program and the partial scholarship he'd earned, Joel had barely managed to pay for tuition. Now, he was juggling an intense schedule, morning lectures, afternoons hitting the campus MMA club, and evenings volunteering at a local youth center's boxing class. It was exhausting, but it felt right. Late that afternoon, he'd stopped by the campus bulletin board and noticed a flyer. A local supplement company was seeking athletes for promotional work. A simple photo shoot, maybe short YouTube ads. "They pay decently," his friend Troy had said, handing Joel the flyer. "You're the perfect guy for it, strong, motivated, and good on camera." Joel had chuckled but kept the flyer. After all, every little income boost helped. His real excitement, however, lay in the Iron Den, a rundown, nearly abandoned gym on the outskirts of town. He'd used part of his inheritance to buy it outright. The place had potential, a wide open space, enough old equipment to salvage, and the possibility of turning it into something bigger. But it needed renovations, new machines, and a marketing plan. Joel had quickly realized it was more than he could finance alone. "I've got to find funding somewhere," he reminded himself, flipping through mental notes. Maybe he could leverage that supplement sponsorship, or even talk to small investors once he proved the Iron Den could turn a profit. Twilight shadows stretched over the campus walkways as he headed to the parking lot. His battered Honda Civic, bought used with the last of Aunt Marilyn's money, rested under a street lamp that buzzed with flickering light. Joel tossed his bag in the passenger seat, started the engine, and pulled out onto the main road. He'd planned to go straight home, but a twist of fate intervened. About 15 minutes from campus, he spotted two silhouettes struggling under a flickering neon sign near a closed storefront. Something about the posture, one figure towering over another, the smaller one pinned against a brick wall, made his heart lurch. Joel slowed the car, squinting through the dim light. The smaller figure suddenly cried out. Without hesitating, Joel cut the wheel, parking haphazardly against the curb. He jumped out, adrenaline spiking. "Hey!" he shouted, sprinting closer. Two men were cornering a young woman with long, dark hair. She had one hand up, trying to shield her face. The men looked halfway intoxicated, brandishing mean grins as though enjoying a twisted game. "Back off!" Joel barked. He'd honed his reflexes in the MMA club and boxing ring, but his gut still twisted with nerves. The thugs turned toward him, one snarling, "Mind your own business, pal," while the other advanced menacingly. Joel raised his fists, bracing himself. "She's clearly in trouble. Let her go." The second man lunged. Joel slipped the punch and countered with a quick jab to the ribs, sending the assailant stumbling. The first guy tried to grab Joel's shoulder, but Joel pivoted, delivering a well-placed knee. Both men cursed, deciding it wasn't worth the hassle. In a flurry of expletives, they staggered off down the alley, leaving the woman trembling against the wall. Joel turned to her, chest heaving. "Are you okay?" She stared back, eyes shining with tears and shock. "Yes, I think so." She brushed hair from her face, the neon glow revealing her features. She was surprisingly poised, despite what just happened, wearing a sleek black coat over a wine-colored dress. Probably had been out for the evening. "Thank you," she managed, voice shaky. "I'm Adriana Warren." Something about the name tickled the back of Joel's mind, but he couldn't place it immediately. "I'm Joel," he said, offering a hand, though it was trembling slightly from adrenaline. "I'll call the police or an ambulance if you need." "No police," Adriana blurted, her expression tensing as though worried about attention or scandal. She inhaled, trying to steady herself. Could you maybe drive me to the nearest hospital? My ankle might be sprained." She winced, barely able to put weight on her left foot. Without another word, Joel looped her arm around his shoulder and helped her limp to his car. She smelled like floral perfume, the kind that hinted at wealth or status. though her disheveled hair suggested the night hadn't gone as planned. Once she was settled in the passenger seat, Joel hopped behind the wheel and headed toward the small hospital he knew was open after hours. He cut a glance at her. "Adriana, do you want me to call someone? Family? A friend?" She hesitated. "I'll call them myself. Just let me handle it." Joel caught the flicker of concern in her eyes. He nodded, focusing on the road. He had no clue who she was beyond a near victim of assault. But for now, that didn't matter. He was just relieved he could help. The rhythmic hum of the engine calmed his racing heart. Adriana typed briskly on her phone, probably updating whoever was on the other end. Joel tried not to overhear her hushed remarks, but a snippet carried over. "Dad, I'm fine. Yes, I'll tell you everything soon." Then a weary sigh. Within minutes, they reached the hospital. Joel helped her inside, where nurses promptly wheeled her away for an exam. He watched from the waiting area, arms folded, mind spinning. Who is she? Something about her name prodded him again. Warren, Judge Warren? Could she possibly be related to that big-shot judge in the city? The name floated around local news more than once. Joel shrugged to himself. He'd done his part. Standing in the brightly lit reception area, he realized this was the second time he'd found himself in a hospital lobby, tense and uncertain first after Dad's violence. Now this. Life had a way of dropping him in dramatic moments. As he waited, a nurse approached. "They'll want a statement from you about what happened outside that shop," she said kindly. "Are you all right?" Joel glanced down at his scuffed knuckles and the faint tremor in his hands. "Yeah," he replied quietly. "I'm all right." He had no idea how this chance meeting might reshape his world. But in the echo of Adriana's shaky, "Thank you," Joel sensed a door opening to a realm of possibilities and complications he'd never imagined. Adriana's doctor insisted she remain at the hospital overnight for observation, so Joel gave a brief incident statement to a bored-looking police officer and waited to see if she needed a ride home. He texted Troy to say he'd be late returning to the dorm, but withheld the details. Troy joked about Joel's knight-in-shining armor syndrome. It was past midnight when Joel finally eased into a plastic chair in the hospital corridor. The overhead fluorescents buzzed like tired bees, and a pungent scent of antiseptic lingered. Joel rubbed his eyes, stifling a yawn. He was about to doze off when rapid footsteps echoed across the tiled floor. He looked up to see a tall man in an impeccable gray suit, his salt-and-pepper hair combed back with surgical precision, Judge Oswald Warren. Joel recognized him from local TV news segments, sharp-eyed, known for his unyielding presence in court. And behind him stood another man wearing a dark blazer, clearly some sort of assistant. Or bodyguard. The judge's gaze swept across the hallway until it landed on Joel. "Where is my daughter?" he demanded, his voice resonating with cool authority. For a moment, Joel's stomach dipped. So this was Adriana's father. "She's with the doctor. I think they're almost done," Joel replied calmly, though his pulse quickened under that intense scrutiny. Judge Warren exhaled sharply, stepping closer. "I'm told you found her in trouble tonight." "Yes, sir," Joel said. "Two guys cornered her near a closed store. I intervened." He tried to keep his tone polite. The judge's eyes narrowed, flicking over Joel's worn hoodie and scuffed sneakers. "You some kind of street vigilante?" Joel bit back a retort. "No, sir. Just a college student. I helped because she needed it." There was a pause, thick with unspoken tension. The older man's gaze softened just a fraction. "I appreciate that you kept my daughter safe." He spoke the words as though forced, more formal than heartfelt. "I've arranged for her transport home and any bills. You may go." Joel bristled at the dismissal. He rose from the chair, determined not to be cowed. "I'd like to say bye to Adriana first, just to make sure she's okay." The judge's mouth tightened. Before he could respond, an older nurse pushed open the exam room door and waved them over. "Adriana's awake now. If one of you would like to see her, we'll be discharging in about an hour." Judge Warren nodded curtly, motioning to Joel. "Go in. We'll wait here." His eyes flicked with something unreadable, a cross between gratitude and wariness. Joel stepped past him, entering the small examination bay where Adriana lay propped on pillows. She looked weary but otherwise intact, her foot bandaged and elevated, an IV drip delivering fluids. Her face brightened when she recognized Joel. "You stayed," she murmured, voice still a bit hoarse. He shrugged, approaching the bed. "Yeah, wanted to make sure you were good." He hesitated. "Your dad's outside." Adriana's expression shifted. She let out a slow breath. "Of course he is. Thanks for not just dumping me here." She tugged the thin hospital blanket higher, as if suddenly feeling exposed. "And for everything earlier tonight." "No problem," Joel replied. "Do you remember what they wanted?" Her gaze drifted. "Probably just a random mugging, or they thought I had money." She forced a weak smile. "I do, I guess. Dad's money." A hint of sadness flickered in her eyes, but she masked it quickly. "Anyway, you saved me from a bigger nightmare." A nurse bustled in, checking Adriana's vitals and verifying paperwork. Joel watched quietly, noticing that Adriana managed a polite front, but her hands trembled whenever she shifted the blanket. She was rattled more deeply than she let on. "Thanks again," she said softly once the nurse left. "You don't even know me, but you risked your safety." Joel gave a small grin. "I was in the right place at the right time. Anyone decent would have done the same." He paused. "So do you need a ride? Or—" She shook her head. "Dad's men will handle it." Then, lowering her voice, "I'm sure he's not being very friendly to you. He doesn't trust strangers." Joel exhaled, recalling that icy stare. "Well, he's definitely not handing me any trophies." Adriana smirked, though her eyes still glistened with leftover fear. "No, he's not big on handing out kindness. Still, it means a lot that you stayed." They locked gazes for a moment, a quiet understanding passing between them. Joel cleared his throat. "I guess I'll head out then. Gotta catch some sleep before class tomorrow." He withdrew a battered business card from his wallet, one he used for the Iron Den's prospective clients. "If you need anything, someone to move boxes, fix your car tire, or scare away creeps, I'm just a call away." Her mouth twitched in a half-laugh. "Sure. The Iron Den, huh? Sounds hardcore." He shrugged. "Just a dream in progress, but yeah, keep it." As he left the room, he felt a knot tighten in his chest. Judge Warren gave him a curt nod in the hall, then turned to talk in low tones with his assistant. Joel overheard the words, "background check," but he pretended not to. Rich people and their paranoia, he mused. Stepping into the crisp night air, Joel finally let go of the breath he'd been holding. Something told him that was far from the last he'd see of Adriana Warren. And from the tension in her father's gaze, Joel suspected life was about to get more complicated than any punching bag he'd faced in the ring. Over the next couple of weeks, Joel's days blurred into a hectic routine. Dawn runs, morning lectures, afternoon MMA club practice, and nights spent patching holes in the Iron Den's leaky ceiling. He was proud of the progress, especially once a local sponsor, Punch Pro Supplements, agreed to feature him in a small marketing campaign. It wasn't huge money, but it chipped away at renovation costs. He found himself occasionally glancing at his phone, curious if Adriana would ever text. She hadn't yet, and he tried not to dwell on it. She must be busy with her own life, with a father who probably has her guarded by private security. He shrugged it off, focusing on midterm exams. Then, out of nowhere, he got a call from a number he didn't recognize. "Hello? Joel Price?" An older male voice snapped. "This is Horace Walters, personal aide to Judge Oswald Warren. The judge requests your presence at his office tomorrow at noon. He suggests it would be advantageous for you to attend." Joel's gut clenched. He wondered if it was some intimidation tactic, but advantage? That word piqued his interest. Sure. Where?" The next afternoon, he stood outside a polished high-rise downtown, collar stiff in a dress shirt he rarely wore. On the 20th floor, a receptionist escorted him into a sleek conference room decorated with austere art. Judge Warren sat behind a heavy oak desk, flipping through papers. He barely acknowledged Joel's entrance until the door closed behind them. "Mr. Price," the judge said curtly, gesturing at an empty chair. "Sit." Joel obliged, trying to keep his posture confident. The judge studied him for a moment. "I've looked into you. Your background is modest. You're a scholarship student trying to renovate a worthless gym." You're also the one who rescued my daughter." Joel bristled at the word worthless, but held his tongue. "I'm proud of what I'm doing with that gym, sir." "Pride doesn't pay bills," Warren retorted. He folded his hands. "I'm a direct man, so I'll be candid. Adriana is pregnant." Joel's mouth fell open. "Pregnant? With how sorry, none of my business, right?" The judge continued, ignoring Joel's surprise. "She's pregnant by a certain Colin Davenport, an ambitious attorney in my circle. But this child threatens Adriana's social standing if it's revealed now. Davenport can't marry her, yet he's chasing a senior partnership that demands a spotless personal record. A scandal could be detrimental." Joel swallowed. "I see." Warren's gaze pinned him. "We need a solution to keep this quiet. A husband on paper, so to speak, until Davenport is ready. That's where you come in." Joel blinked, a thrill of disbelief rushing through him. "You're joking, right?" "I rarely joke," the judge said icily. "Marry Adriana. Sign the child's birth certificate as father. Remain in a marriage of convenience for up to 5 years, or until Davenport can step forward." He slid a folder across the desk. "In return, I'll wire $500,000 into your account and provide a monthly stipend. I'll also cover any legal matters and living expenses." Joel stared at the folder, his throat dry. That much money could transform the Iron Den overnight. New equipment, real marketing, the works. He could secure his future, but the idea this was insane. "Why me?" he murmured. Warren's lips thinned. "Because you're a nobody with no ties to powerful circles. My daughter respects you for saving her, and I can trust you won't complicate the arrangement with romantic expectations." "Right," Joel muttered, ignoring the small sting to his pride. "And Adriana, she agrees?" Warren paused. "She understands the necessity. She'll cooperate." A swirl of emotions threatened Joel's composure. This was a raw deal, but then $500K was life-changing. He eyed the contract. "What if I say no? I find another candidate, and you lose a golden opportunity," the judge replied, voice flat. Joel's mind raced. The Iron Den needed serious capital, and he had no other leads, but a fake marriage, this was morally murky. "I want conditions," he said at last. "I keep the money even if something happens. I want a house someplace separate from yours where Adriana and I live. No interference. And my gym remains mine, protected." Judge Warren exhaled, then nodded curtly. "We can negotiate terms, but the key premise stands. You marry her, pretend to be the father, and help preserve her reputation. You keep your mouth shut about Davenport." Joel leaned back, heart pounding. "I'll need to see the final contract." A flicker of victory crossed the judge's face. "Done." He rose, extending a hand. "We'll finalize details this week." Joel left the building with a weight in his chest. The proposition felt like a crossroads he never expected. Sell his name for a wad of cash? Yet wasn't that money the key to everything he'd worked for? As he walked along the busy street, passers-by hurried by, unaware that his life had just been upended. Days later, the arrangement was inked. Joel stood in a small private chapel, wearing a crisp, dark suit that Judge Warren's tailor had sent over. He tried not to gawk at the extravagance. Tall candles, stained glass windows throwing colored light across the aisle, and a hush that felt oddly funereal for a wedding. Beside him, a sober-faced officiant waited with well-practiced neutrality. Adriana arrived at the last moment, slender in a simple white gown that fit her shape elegantly. Joel could tell she hadn't slept well. Shadows under her eyes gave away her nerves. Their gazes met, an unspoken apology in hers. "I'm sorry we have to do this." "Me too," his eyes seemed to say back. The ceremony was quick, almost mechanical. Vows were recited in low tones, about cherishing each other in sickness and in health. Joel found it surreal, glancing at Adriana to see if she felt the same strangeness. She did. Judge Warren stood a few paces behind, arms folded, wearing a pinched expression as if urging them to hurry. The pen felt cold in Joel's grasp when he signed the marriage certificate. Adriana followed, setting her signature with trembling fingers. The officiant stamped it, murmured a polite, "Congratulations," and that was that. Outside, the judge motioned them into a waiting limo. "There's a brief flight to Hawaii booked for your honeymoon. Keep up appearances." He gave Joel a hard look. Remember our contract. No slip-ups. Joel nodded, helping Adriana into the car. She exhaled, pressing a hand to her temple. This is crazy, she whispered once the door shut. I never thought I'd get married like this. He managed a half-smile. Same, but it won't be forever, right? She looked out the window, silent. By the time they reached the airport, neither had said much more. Hawaii was a blur. For a few days, they played the loving newlyweds poolside, exchanging quick kisses for onlookers and snapping cheerful selfies at the beach. But at night, they retreated to separate bedrooms. Joel found it awkward to pose in pictures, arms around a wife he barely knew. Adriana soldiered through with forced laughter, but Joel sensed the tension behind her polite mask. One evening, while sipping non-alcoholic cocktails at a secluded bar near their resort, Adriana sighed. I'm grateful to you, she said quietly, swirling the ice in her glass. I know you're doing this for your gym, and I'm doing it for my father's demands, but still. Thank you. Joel's chest tightened. We'll get through it, he reassured her. We just have to play our parts. She gave a small nod, eyes distant. They returned stateside a week later, stepping into a grand house the judge had furnished their house. It felt more like a hotel, lavish but impersonal. A butler greeted them, handing over keys. Joel noticed cameras discreetly placed, as if ensuring the judge could monitor them. He frowned, remembering a clause in the contract about discretion. We're not truly alone, he realized. Dropping his suitcase on the marble floor, Joel took in the opulent living room, the plush couches, the silent air that reeked of money. Adriana lingered behind him, hugging herself as though the house felt colder than it looked. I'll, take the bedroom upstairs, she murmured. Joel nodded. I'll find another one. See you in the morning? She mustered a tiny smile. Sure. Good night, husband. He snorted softly at the irony. Night, wife. Her footsteps faded up the winding staircase, leaving Joel in the echoing foyer with only his thoughts for company. This is it, he realized. I'm married to a stranger, caretaker of a child who isn't mine. Also, I can finance a dream. A swirl of unease and curiosity knotted his stomach. He shut his eyes, recalling the battered walls of the iron den. Someday, he vowed silently, this sacrifice will be worth it. And so began their married life, an arrangement forged by necessity, layered with secrets, and overshadowed by a father's watchful eyes. Little did Joel know, the uneasy flutter in his chest for Adriana would only grow stronger in the days to come. A warm sun lit the quiet suburban street where Joel Price lived with his now wife, Adriana Warren Price. Their marriage, a contract known only to a select few. Inside the house Judge Warren had purchased for them, the air conditioner hummed softly, countering the late spring heat. Joel gently placed a hand on Adriana's back as he escorted her to the car. Easy, take your time, he said, concern lacing his voice. Adriana, 7 months pregnant, gave him a grateful look. She settled into the passenger seat, one hand resting on her round belly. I can't believe how heavy I feel these days. Even tying my sneakers is like an Olympic event. Joel smiled, carefully buckling her seatbelt. He'd accompanied her to every prenatal appointment for the past month. It was Judge Warren's expectation that Joel play the supportive husband, though Joel was discovering he actually cared about Adriana's well-being, contract or not. We'll be back before lunch, he said, starting the engine. Then you can rest. They drove to the clinic where Adriana's OB-GYN doctor, Martin, greeted them in a calm, professional manner. During the ultrasound, Joel found his chest tightening at the rhythmic pulse of the baby's heartbeat echoing through the small room. He glanced at Adriana, who blinked back tears. Everything looks healthy, Dr. Martin announced, easing the tension. Baby's measuring well for around 30 weeks. Keep up the vitamins and watch the stress. Joel exhaled, relieved. Adriana managed a half-smile, but as they left the clinic, a figure leaned against a black sedan in the parking lot. Colin Davenport, the baby's biological father. He looked every bit the slick, ambitious attorney, clean-cut hair, crisp suit, a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Adriana, Colin said flatly, offering a nod. His gaze flicked to Joel, full of unspoken hostility. May I speak to you for a moment? Adriana tensed. Joel's stomach churned. He's allowed to be here, right? Judge Warren's the one who wants it hush-hush. Still, the tension was palpable. Joel, can I? Adriana gestured awkwardly, asking him to give them a second. He forced a neutral expression. Sure, I'll be over there. He walked a short distance away, arms folded, watching quietly. Even from that vantage, he caught snatches of Colin's sharp tone. Looking bigger every day, can't you take better care of yourself? And, you know I'm swamped, or I'd be here more. Joel's chest tightened with anger. Colin's remarks about Adriana's body sounded cruel. Eventually, Adriana brushed tears aside, turned on her heel, and marched back to Joel. Let's go, she muttered, voice shaking. He's too busy for real conversation. They climbed into the car, slamming doors in unison. As Joel drove off, Adriana stared out the window, voice quivering. He criticized me for looking bloated. Can you believe that? Joel's grip tightened on the steering wheel. He's an idiot, he said simply. You're carrying his child, and that's what he cares about. Adriana let out a humorless laugh. He only cares that I don't embarrass him publicly, and with my dad looming over everything, I'm stuck. She glanced at Joel's profile, her shoulders sagging. I'm thankful you're here. He allowed himself a small smile. I'm in this with you, he murmured, recalling the contract but also realizing it wasn't just about the deal anymore. Seeing her vulnerable awakened a genuine protectiveness in him. Is that crazy? A month later, Adriana jolted awake at dawn with a startled cry. Joel rushed into her bedroom. Yes, they still maintained separate rooms to find her gripping the sheets, face contorted in pain. Something's wrong, she gasped, sweat plastering hair to her temples. I think the baby's coming early. Joel's heart pounded. We're not due for another month, right? Tell that to him, she snapped, half panicked. As another contraction seized her, Joel hurried to help her up, supporting her weight. They hustled to the car, nerves on a razor's edge. At the hospital, chaos melded into an exhausting blur. Nurses wheeled Adriana away, hooking her up to monitors. One nurse guided Joel to a gown, and before he knew it, he was at her side, holding her hand through searing contractions. The sterile smell of disinfectant mingled with her frantic breathing, her nails digging into his wrist. Colin was nowhere to be found. Judge Warren had been informed but was tied up in court proceedings out of state. Joel swallowed the knot of anxiety, leaning close to Adriana's ear. I'm right here. You're doing great. She squeezed his hand hard. Hours passed in a swirl of pain and encouragement until finally, a baby's cry split the air. Joel's vision blurred with tears he hadn't realized were forming. Dr. Martin lifted the tiny infant, a boy, slick and squalling. Adriana collapsed against the pillows, sobbing with relief. Nurses checked the baby, confirming he was premature but stable. They cleaned him up, then placed him into Adriana's trembling arms. An onrush of emotion flooded Joel as he looked at mother and child. For a fleeting second, it felt real, as if they were truly a family. The birth certificate was swiftly prepared, labeled Lorenzo Price. Joel's mind reeled at the finality of it. He was listed as the father on an official document. This child isn't mine, he thought with a pang. But the contract demanded this farce, and ironically, here he was, more present than Colin or even Judge Warren. As Adriana wept, stroking the baby's head, Joel felt a mix of awe, protectiveness, and the faintest whisper of guilt. Because in that moment, he cared. Maybe more than he should. 2 weeks after Lorenzo's premature arrival, the house was strewn with baby paraphernalia, tiny blankets, formula bottles, and half-unpacked boxes of newborn clothes Judge Warren had shipped in bulk. Adriana rested on the sofa, exhausted from late-night feedings. Joel hovered uncertainly, wanting to help, but not wanting to overstep. He'd come to admire her dedication. Despite the earlier tension with Colin, she was fiercely devoted to caring for their son. Or her son. Their son. He struggled with the language. Lorenzo was legally his child on paper. Yet he tried to maintain some emotional distance, fearing heartbreak once the contract ended. Colin dropped by only twice, both times in the middle of the day when Joel was out. Adriana told Joel in hushed, tense tones that Colin mostly complained about the baby's fussiness and the disruption to his career. He never stayed longer than 15 minutes. Every time he shows up, Adriana confided one evening, bouncing Lorenzo in her arms, he checks his phone more than he checks his son. He keeps talking about the partnership he's chasing, how important it is. It's like we don't exist. Joel watched them from across the living room, a strange ache in his chest. He set aside the blueprint he'd been studying for expanding the iron den. "I'm sorry," he murmured, rising to take the baby so Adriana could stretch. "You deserve better. Lorenzo does too." She sank into a chair, rubbing her temples. "Sometimes I wonder if my father made a mistake picking you. At least you give a damn." Her words came out more bitter than she intended, and she winced. "I'm sorry, I'm tired." Joel shook his head, gently swaying the baby. "I get it." An uneasy hush fell. They both knew what their arrangement was, yet the lines kept blurring. That evening, while Adriana napped, Judge Warren called. His voice crackled with disapproval over speakerphone. "I understand Colin visited. You must keep these meetings discreet, Adriana," he lectured. "No scandal, understood?" She rolled her eyes, half listening. "Yes, Dad. Everything's quiet. Nobody suspects the truth." Joel cleared his throat. "Judge Warren, the baby's healthy, but maybe we should lighten up on Adriana's stress. She just gave birth." He regretted speaking up as soon as the words left his mouth. The judge was silent for a beat. "Mr. Price," he said icily, "my daughter's well-being is indeed paramount, but so is her reputation. Ensure your arrangement remains intact." Then he ended the call. Adriana looked at Joel, eyebrows raised in exasperation. "He's more worried about a scandal than if I have postpartum depression." Joel's jaw clenched. "You're not alone," he said gently. "I promise." Despite his vow, he felt powerless against the judge's looming influence. Some nights, Adriana retreated to her room, burdened by mental and physical fatigue. Joel tackled chores around the house, laundry, dishes, cleaning bottles, anything to ease her load. Yet a wedge of uncertainty remained. When he headed upstairs to the second-floor study one late night, he noticed Adriana standing in the hallway watching him. Her hair was messy, dark circles under her eyes, but something else flickered in her gaze like yearning. Or jealousy? "You're working hard on your gym project?" she asked softly, arms crossed over her thin robe. "Yeah, I'm finalizing some financing," he explained. "I'm so close to turning the iron den profitable." Adriana gave a half smile. "You're always so dedicated. Sometimes I wonder if you even see me as more than your roommate in this fiasco." Joel's pulse kicked. I do see you," he said carefully. A flurry of awkwardness coiled around them. "But we're in a complicated spot." She nodded, tears threatening. It's lonely, Joel." He fought the urge to step closer and pull her into a comforting embrace. Instead, he tucked his hands into his pockets. "If you need anything, just ask." Adriana's lip trembled, but she nodded and headed back to her room. Joel stared at the closed door for a long moment. "She's lonely. But how can I truly be there when this marriage is built on lies?" Downstairs, the baby monitor crackled with Lorenzo's soft coo. Joel exhaled, feeling the weight of the entire house pressing in on him. Surrounded by illusions, each day left him torn, unsure which role he was truly supposed to play. It was nearly midnight when Joel parked his car near a shabby apartment complex on the outskirts of town. He'd been returning from the iron den where he'd spent the evening installing a few new machines when he spotted a small cluster of furniture tossed onto the sidewalk. A frantic female voice carried over the hum of the night. He flicked off his headlights and stepped out. A tired-looking woman, hair askew, stood next to two teenage girls, all three huddled around a flimsy pile of chairs and boxes. The older girl clutched a blanket protectively around her sister. The younger one sniffled, trying to stifle tears. "Everything okay?" Joel asked softly, though he could see it was anything but. The woman spun around, startled. "Who are you?" she demanded, fear etched in her expression. "I'm Joel," he said, raising his hands to show no harm. "I saw the stuff on the sidewalk. Are you being evicted?" The woman's shoulders sagged. Yes. She sighed heavily, blinking as though to hold back tears. I'm Eleanor. This is Della and Sybil, my daughters. Her voice cracked. I have nowhere else to go. Joel's heart clenched. What about a friend's place or a shelter? Eleanor brushed at her cheeks. Shelters are full tonight, and my friends have all shut their doors. The two teenage girls exchanged worried glances. Della, maybe 18, was trying to appear brave for her sister, who looked around 14. They're just kids, Joel thought, a rush of compassion flooding him. An image flashed of himself once, feeling helpless under his father's cruelty. He hesitated, then took a measured breath. Look, I have a small property, my late aunt's house. It's mostly empty, but at least it has heat, a fridge, some furniture. If you'd like, you can crash there temporarily. He realized how it might sound an odd stranger offering help. No strings attached. I just can't leave you here. Eleanor studied him warily. Why would you do that? He shrugged, thinking of Aunt Marilyn's kindness. I know what it's like to be cornered with no good options. Then he added, I'll show you ID. You can send your location to someone you trust. It's your call. A tense moment passed before Eleanor exhaled. We have no choice. She turned to the girls. Pack up what we can. Joel helped load the furniture into his trunk and back seat, fitting what little they owned around his gym gear. During the drive, Della and Sybil clung to each other, speaking in hushed voices. Eleanor sat stiffly, arms folded as though prepared to jump out if Joel did anything suspicious. They arrived at Aunt Marilyn's old house, an unassuming one-story with a detached garage. Joel unlocked the door, flipping on the overhead light to reveal a modest living room, dusty but functional. It's a bit rough, he admitted. I come by sometimes to check on it, but it's safe. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears as she set down a box. Thank you, she whispered, voice trembling with relief. The girls stood close, uncertain yet grateful. While the sisters explored, Joel took a moment to set up clean linens he'd stashed away in a closet. The place needed a thorough cleaning, but at least it had a working shower and a few pieces of furniture. He glanced at Eleanor, exhausted, anxious, and something in him softened. Adriana's house is full of tension. Maybe I can at least do this good deed here. Make yourselves at home, he said gently. I'll drop by tomorrow with food and supplies. Eleanor nodded, eyes shining. I don't know how to repay you. Joel mustered a small grin. Just get some rest. Late as it was, he drove back to the marble-floored house he shared with Adriana and Lorenzo. Parking quietly, he slipped in, noticing all the lights off except a soft glow from the nursery. Adriana was asleep on a rocking chair, Lorenzo in her arms. Joel carefully lifted the baby, placing him in the crib. She stirred, blinking blearily. Where were you? She murmured drowsily. He hesitated. Saw a family in trouble and helped them out. No big deal. She nodded, already half asleep again. Joel retreated to his own room, mind swirling with the evening's events. The difference between Adriana's upscale environment and Eleanor's dire straits was stark, yet he felt equally tied to both situations, caring for Adriana as her false spouse and now extending kindness to Eleanor's family. He lay awake, the silent house pressing in. What am I getting myself into? He wondered, letting the night's heaviness lull him into uneasy dreams. A week slipped by. Eleanor and her daughters settled into Aunt Marilyn's old home, gradually cleaning it up with Joel's help. He brought them groceries and fresh linens, sometimes offering tips on job listings he heard about near the Iron Den. Della, turning 18 soon, was eager to find part-time work, while Sybil mostly curled up with a worn book Eleanor salvaged from their old place. Meanwhile, tension simmered in Joel's own household. Adriana noticed him disappearing in the evenings and returning late. Lorenzo's routine had stabilized somewhat. He no longer cried incessantly at night, but Adriana's mood was increasingly brittle. One afternoon, Joel gently guided Lorenzo through a bottle feeding while Adriana browsed her laptop for baby supplies. She eyed Joel as he explained, I'm going to check on a friend. Her name's Eleanor. She's had a rough time. Her? Adriana repeated, tone clipped. A woman friend? He hesitated, feeling guilt coil in his stomach. She's got 2 daughters. I found them practically homeless. They're staying in my aunt's old house. Adriana's jaw tightened. So you're playing hero again, and we're only hearing about it now? What if that brings attention to us? Judge Warren doesn't need to know everything, Joel interjected, trying to keep calm. Eleanor's situation doesn't affect our arrangement. He gently burped Lorenzo, patting the baby's back. Adriana bristled, arms folded protectively. You keep disappearing, and every time I ask, you say you're out helping her. Are you sure you're not? He stiffened. Not what? She looked away. I don't know involved with her. Joel swallowed hard. A denial sprang to his lips, but part of him recognized the seeds of attraction he felt around Eleanor, nothing overt, just a sense of closeness. I'm just making sure she and her daughters aren't on the street, he said firmly. Adriana's voice trembled with something close to jealousy. I'm not sure which is worse, the idea that you might want her, or the fact that you can give her attention while barely looking at me. Hey, Joel said softly, stepping closer. We're in a weird spot, you and I. But I do care about you, Adriana. She looked at him, eyes filling with tears. Before either could speak further, Lorenzo let out a hungry wail, and the moment shattered into practical fuss. Over at Aunt Marilyn's house, Eleanor had begun warming to Joel's presence. She'd offered to cook a simple meal in thanks. When he dropped by that evening, the aroma of chili greeted him. Della was setting out bowls while Sybil scrolled through her phone with the half-attention of a teenager. Eleanor smiled hesitantly. You do so much, let me do this. Joel eyed the cramped kitchen with its dated cabinets. You don't have to feed me, you know. I'm just checking in. Eleanor shrugged. Maybe I want to feed you. A gentle flush dusted her cheeks. This is the only way I can repay your kindness. They shared an unspoken moment, a quiet intensity passing between them. He caught himself stop. You're not free. The contract with Adriana loomed in his mind, along with her fresh accusations. After dinner, they sat in the living room. Sybil rummaged through the boxes, showing Joel a tattered photo album of their earlier, happier times. Della chimed in about searching for a part-time job at a nearby diner. A sense of normalcy settled, comforting in its simplicity. But as night fell, Eleanor walked Joel to the door. She lingered, biting her lip. Joel, thank you. You gave us a roof when no one else would. I don't know how to express... Her voice trailed off. Joel's chest tightened. The last thing he wanted was to lead her on, but her gratitude felt like a gentle tide pulling them closer. You don't owe me anything, he murmured. I'm just glad you're safe. In a sudden rush, Eleanor stepped forward and touched his arm. I feel safe around you, she whispered. Her eyes flicked to his lips, a vulnerable invitation that nearly broke his resolve. His heart hammered. Adriana's question echoes. Are you sure you're not involved? If he allowed this moment to bloom, he'd be betraying whatever fragile bond existed in his fake marriage. Eleanor won. He swallowed hard, stepping back with gentle firmness. I need to go. She blinked, hurt flickering across her face. Of course. She forced a soft laugh. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make it weird. Joel gave a tight nod, escaping into the night air with his pulse racing. As he drove away, guilt gnawed at him. He was juggling 2 worlds, Adriana, tethered by contract yet stirring genuine emotion, and Eleanor, rescued from hardship, now awakened to possible affection. The next day, a black luxury car pulled up outside Joel and Adriana's house. Judge Warren himself emerged, stern-faced. Inside the living room, he confronted Joel with cold disapproval. I hear you've been gallivanting about, he said, voice dripping with disdain. My daughter needs you here, focused. Do not let any side endeavors jeopardize this arrangement. Joel bristled. I'm not jeopardizing anything. I'm fulfilling my role, father to Lorenzo, supportive partner to Adriana. Warren's eyes narrowed. I don't trust you, Price. Keep your personal projects and personal connections under control, or you'll regret it. As the judge left, a heavy silence clung to the house. Adriana stood in the hall, cradling Lorenzo, gaze unreadable. Joel met her eyes briefly before turning away, heart pounding with the realization that everything was unraveling. He had no idea how to keep Adriana, Lorenzo, Eleanor, and Judge Warren from colliding in one disastrous storm. And the final blow came that very evening, when he returned to Aunt Marilyn's house for a quick drop-in. Eleanor greeted him, nerves on edge. She quietly showed him a small pile of receipts, brand new clothes, fancy groceries, even a second-hand iPad. She stammered, "I can explain, Joel. A friend gave me some money. For the girls." "A friend?" he repeated, suspicion tugging. "Who?" She hesitated, eyes darting away. "It's not important." But a sinking feeling told him something was off. She seemed distant, her phone buzzing with unknown calls. Joel left with a swirl of confusion, heading home to find Adriana in tears after yet another terse phone call with Colin. In that single day, both women he cared about were slipping away into secrets. As he tried to calm Adriana, he couldn't stop wondering, who was Eleanor talking to, and why the sudden cash flow? That night, as Adriana dozed fitfully and Lorenzo whimpered in the nursery, Joel stared at the ceiling, torn between loyalty and longing, honor and temptation. The game had grown far more dangerous than he'd ever expected, and the final lines of his neatly constructed arrangement were fast crumbling beneath his feet. A hush seemed to have settled over Aunt Marilyn's old house, where Eleanor and her daughters, Della and Sybil, had been living. The morning sun leaked through dusty curtains, illuminating the modest living room. Joel Price perched on the worn couch, sipping a mug of lukewarm coffee Eleanor had handed him. Despite the cozy scene, tension radiated between them. Eleanor, dressed in a simple floral top and jeans, sat across from him, fiddling with the hem of her shirt. "Joel, I need to be honest," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I've been feeling grateful, obviously, but something deeper." He swallowed, the conversation he'd been dreading. "Eleanor?" She lifted her gaze, eyes reflecting a mix of vulnerability and determination. "You're the reason my kids and I have a roof over our heads. You bring groceries, fix leaky faucets, even help Della look for part-time work. And every time I see you, She paused, emotions roiling. "I realize I think I'm falling for you." The air felt charged, as though a summer storm brewed nearby. Joel exhaled shakily, setting the mug aside. "Eleanor, you've been through so much. Maybe you're just—" She shook her head. "I know the difference between gratitude and affection." A faint blush crept to her cheeks. "I wanted you to know." Before Joel could respond, the front door swung open and Della stumbled in, balancing a small grocery bag. "Mom, Sybil's texting me from the park, she says." She froze, noticing the atmosphere. An awkward hush followed. Joel cleared his throat. I should get going." Eleanor's expression flickered with disappointment, but she nodded. As he walked outside, a swirl of confusion and guilt churned in his gut. Why is everything so complicated? A single question hammered his thoughts. Adriana. Where does she fit if he tried not to dwell on it? But the day refused to offer clarity. By late afternoon, Adriana announced she'd be leaving for a quick getaway with Colin Davenport. Judge Warren had arranged it for appearances. Joel's jaw tightened at the mention of Colin, who seemed indifferent to Adriana except when it benefited his career. Yet she was going away with him anyway. "It's just a weekend," Adriana muttered, packing a small duffel in the bedroom they rarely shared. "My father insists Colin and I show our unity in front of some old friends." Joel hovered in the doorway. "So you'll pretend everything's fine between you two?" She shrugged, avoiding his gaze. "That's what this entire marriage is anyway, right? Pretending." A tinge of bitterness laced her voice. Then she softened. "Look, I hate it, but if it makes Dad back off and keeps Colin content, maybe I can buy some peace." He fought the urge to tell her not to go, to fight for a genuine life with him, though that made no sense when their union was a contract. Instead, he offered a quiet, "Be careful." She paused, lips parted as if searching for words. Then, unable to speak, she zipped the duffel and brushed past him, footsteps echoing down the hall. Within the hour, she was gone. That evening, Joel retreated to his newly refurbished Iron Den gym, hoping to distract himself by coaching a few MMA enthusiasts. As he wrapped up a sparring session, his phone buzzed with an unknown number. He wiped sweat from his brow, stepping outside into the crisp twilight air. "Hello?" No immediate response. Then a male voice, raspy. "Remember me, brother?" Joel's gut twisted. Gavin. It had been ages since they'd spoken directly. "How'd you get my number?" Joel replied, bracing himself. "Not important," Gavin sneered. "I hear you're playing hero again, rescuing that woman, Eleanor. Don't get too cozy, Joel. You're not the only one who can offer her a bright future." "What are you talking about?" A dark chuckle. "She's been meeting someone else, investing in a better life. Let's just say I'm back in town and I always get what I want." The call ended abruptly. Joel stared at the phone, heart racing. So Gavin's found a way into Eleanor's life? The memory of her new fancy groceries and the odd phone calls haunted him. Could Gavin be the friend funneling money? The notion of Gavin manipulating Eleanor rattled Joel. He wants to undermine me or maybe just cause chaos. A swirl of anger and dread tightened Joel's chest. He realized he had more pressing battles than just Colin or Judge Warren. Gavin was back, threatening to tear down everything Joel had built, starting with Eleanor's fragile trust. The next day, Joel woke with a gnawing sense of unease. Rain pelted the windows of the grand house he technically shared with Adriana, its marble floors and ornate decor feeling emptier than ever. She was off with Colin for a weekend charade, and Lorenzo stayed with Miss Hartridge at Judge Warren's request to preserve appearances, naturally. Unable to shake the tension, Joel decided to check on Eleanor. Driving through the drizzle, he arrived at Aunt Marilyn's old house. The front yard looked oddly pristine, no scattered bikes, no sign of Della or Sybil. The shades were drawn shut. He knocked on the door, no answer. Tried the handle unlocked. Stepping inside, he found the living room half bare, the old furniture rearranged, boxes gone. A cold pit formed in his stomach as he moved deeper into the silent space. "Eleanor?" he called, voice echoing. No response. He hurried to the bedrooms, empty, closets cleared out. In the kitchen, he spotted an envelope resting on the counter. Heart thudding, he opened it. A handwritten note read, "Joel, I'm so sorry for leaving like this. I've met someone who can give my daughters and me a better future, a life with real stability and comfort. What you did was kind, but we need more than kindness. You have your gym, your own responsibilities. I need a man who can support me fully. Gavin has promised everything I need. He says you'll understand. Thank you for everything. I truly am grateful, but I can't stay." Eleanor Joel's hands trembled. Gavin. A surge of betrayal and anger twisted inside him. For a moment, he just stood there, letting the note flutter onto the tile floor. He'd begun to feel a genuine bond with Eleanor, her gentle gratitude, the spark in her eyes. Was it all overshadowed by Gavin's manipulative charm and the lure of money? His throat constricted. I shouldn't be surprised. Gavin always took what he wanted. Memories of childhood flitted by. Gavin claiming the best sports gear, the biggest slice of praise from their father. Now, he was snatching Eleanor. Joel sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. He felt like a fool for believing he could protect her, that she might choose him. I should have known better. Anger warred with heartbreak. Eleanor's note stung with finality. She hadn't even said goodbye in person. Late that afternoon, as gloom gathered, Adriana unexpectedly returned. Her weekend trip must have ended sooner. Joel was still in the living room, the house dark. When she walked in, hair damp from rain, she saw the haunted look on Joel's face. "What happened?" she asked quietly, setting her suitcase aside. He hesitated, caught in a swirl of raw emotions. "Eleanor left, with Gavin." Adriana's eyes widened, though a flicker of relief or something else crossed her features. "Oh, Joel, I'm sorry." She moved closer, searching his face. "Are you okay?" He shook his head. "No, I cared about her, but she said Gavin can give her more than I can." She lowered herself onto the couch beside him. I know how that feels to be brushed aside because someone else seems better." A soft, bitter laugh. "It's basically what Colin does to me." Their shared regret hung in the quiet. At that moment, both realized they were two lonely souls in a massive house, trapped by illusions. Adriana tentatively placed a hand on Joel's shoulder. He exhaled unsteadily, leaning into the warmth of her touch. "Sometimes I wish this arrangement was genuine," she whispered, tears brimming, "because I can't keep feeling alone." Joel's chest constricted, and for a heartbeat, he considered closing the distance, pulling her into an embrace. But the memory of Eleanor's departure still throbbed, and the contract with Adriana overshadowed any real confession. Instead, they sat side by side, silent, letting the storm outside drown their unspoken pain. A week later, Joel was trudging through day-to-day life, still shaken by Eleanor's abrupt exit. Adriana fussed over Lorenzo, who'd returned from Miss Hartridge's care, but her eyes held a quiet sadness, as if she sensed Joel's heartbreak. They didn't talk about it, burying themselves in routine. Then came a frantic call from Iris Price, Joel's younger sister. He barely heard the phone ring over the roar of an industrial fan at the Iron Den, but once he answered, panic exploded in his ear. "Joel, it's Dad. He's had a heart episode, and the company it's on the verge of bankruptcy." Iris's usually calm voice cracked. "Gavin's been running everything into the ground. Now he's vanished, and we can't even track him. Our accounts are a mess. We need your help." Joel froze, anger and urgency colliding. Gavin again. First, he stole Eleanor. Now he left their father's company in ruins. But Alfred was also to blame for trusting Gavin blindly. Still, Dad is sick. And it's my family's legacy, too. Without hesitation, Joel locked up the gym and sped to the Price construction offices. The building, once bustling, looked bleak, with half its staff gone. Inside, he found Beatrice Price near tears, and a nurse by Alfred's office administering medication. Alfred himself, ashen-faced, was being taken to the hospital. In the conference room, battered ledgers and spreadsheets lay scattered. Iris clutched them, expression desperate. "We're hemorrhaging money on failed projects," Gavin started. "The bank's threatening to foreclose. We can't pay the workers' salaries next month." Joel's mind spun. I left this place behind for a reason. But he couldn't walk away. Not with Aunt Marilyn's shares in the company. Not with the vow he once made to himself to be better than their father. "Let me see those documents." He spent hours cross-referencing deals Gavin had signed shady subcontractors, inflated invoices. The next day, Joel brought in a lawyer friend from his college. Together, they compiled enough evidence to oust Gavin from his position wherever he was and restructure the company. They'd have to default on certain projects, renegotiate bank loans, and slash overhead to stay afloat. A few days later, in a small meeting with the remaining board members, Joel hammered out a rescue plan. He used the last of his personal funds and the leftover money from the contract marriage, which stung to prop up employee payroll. A hush fell as the board voted to name Joel interim CEO in Gavin's absence. Beatrice gave her son a tearful nod. "Thank you, Joel," she whispered, voice trembling with relief. "Your father was wrong about you." Joel forced a thin smile. The memory of Alfred disowning him all those years ago still burned. But now, as paramedics readied to transfer Alfred from one hospital ward to another, Joel felt no triumph, just exhaustion. I didn't do it for him, but for Iris, for Mom, for Aunt Marilyn's memory. And Gavin remained unseen. Rumors said he fled the state, maybe with Eleanor at his side. Joel tried not to dwell on that. He had a crumbling business to salvage, plus his hollow life waiting back at the ornate house. Back at home, the swirl of responsibilities weighed on Joel. The Price construction crisis demanded endless hours, leaving him little time to dwell on personal heartbreak. Adriana, meanwhile, had her own troubles. Colin was pushing for an early dissolution of the marriage contract. He wanted Adriana free on paper so he could secure a powerful partnership at his law firm. One night, Adriana found Joel slumped in the study, half buried in spreadsheets from Price Construction. She approached quietly, Lorenzo asleep upstairs. "Joel, can we talk?" He rubbed his eyes, turning to see her standing in the dim light. Her cheeks were flushed with emotion. "Sure," he said wearily. She took a shaky breath. "Colin wants me to divorce you right away. He's threatening to cut all ties if I don't. My father is not opposing it, actually." Joel's throat tightened. "So the contract ends earlier than 5 years?" She nodded, sadness flickering in her eyes. "And I think it's best," she whispered. We both know we've been living in a fantasy that's not real. We're both hurting in different ways. Maybe letting go is the right move. His heart clenched, thinking of the fleeting closeness they'd shared late-night talks over Lorenzo's crib, the tension that sometimes melted into warmth. But it was always built on a lie, right? Adriana's voice quivered. Part of me. She bit her lip. Part of me wanted this to be real, Joel. You're the only man who's treated me with genuine kindness. But the rest of it, Colin, my father, this whole arrangement, it's tearing me apart. Joel rose from the chair, stepping closer. If that's what you want, I won't stand in your way. He swallowed the knot in his throat. Is it what I want? Tears welled in her eyes. It feels like the only way forward, but I hate it. She exhaled a trembling sigh. We should talk about the house, finances. Judge Warren will probably handle a chunk, but I want to make sure you're stable. I know your gym is your priority, plus the price company stuff now. He managed a small nod. I'll survive. I always do. They fell silent. Finally, Adriana forced a wry smile. We had some good times, didn't we? Even if it was a big, messy lie. Joel's heart ached. We did, he admitted softly. And Lorenzo's safe with you, no matter what. A day later, they signed preliminary divorce papers, each stroke of the pen feeling like a final cut to their fragile bond. Colin's lawyer oversaw the procedure, smirking in satisfaction. Judge Warren barely concealed his relief. Joel left the office with a hollow ache in his chest. That evening, he returned to the big, now lifeless house. Adriana was already packing her essentials, quietly preparing to leave with Lorenzo. She paused in the hallway to embrace Joel, a fleeting hug, her tears dampening his shoulder. I'm sorry, she whispered, voice cracking. He rested a hand gently on her back. Me too. When she stepped away, he felt as though a chapter of his life had abruptly ended, like the wind had swept away any semblance of closeness they'd built. The echo of her footsteps faded, and Joel stood alone, only the faint hum of the air conditioner filling the vacant halls. A gray drizzle clung to the city skyline as Joel Price made his way to the newly expanded Iron Den gym. It had been over 6 months since he last saw Adriana, their contractual marriage officially dissolved. In that time, Joel threw himself into work reinvesting profits from the Iron Den's steady growth into a budding real estate venture. He had even rescued his father's construction firm, Price Construction, from bankruptcy, a project that demanded countless late nights and grueling negotiations. Externally, Joel thrived. He sealed deals with local developers, opened a second gym location, and poured capital into flipping an old apartment complex. People whispered that Joel had made it, the underdog son forging a respectable empire. Yet each step forward brought a piercing sense of isolation. He stepped into the Iron Den's bustling lobby, politely nodding to the front desk staff and a few weightlifters who called out, "Morning, boss." The space was lit with bright LED panels, showing brand new equipment glinting under the fluorescent glow. Posters of Joel from past MMA promotions decorated one wall. Despite the outward success, Joel felt a hollowness in his chest. Memories lingered. Eleanor leaving for Gavin's promise of fortune, Adriana quietly exiting their marble-floored house with Lorenzo in her arms. The last Joel heard, Adriana had gone to live with Colin Davenport again. She must be content by now, he thought with a bleak pang. His phone buzzed, flashing Iris Price on the screen. Joel answered, stepping into his private office. "Hey, Iris. Everything okay?" She sighed. "Dad's stable, his heart condition isn't worsening, but he's still on restricted activity. Mom's calmer, too, now that the construction company is back on its feet. I just wanted to see how you're doing." Joel forced a laugh. "I'm fine. Busy." Iris paused. Busy or avoiding life? "Maybe both," he admitted softly. He ended the call soon after, the silence in his office pressing in. "I can keep building my empire, but does any of it matter if I'm alone?" A pang of longing rippled through him. He rarely let himself dwell on the quiet evenings spent with Adriana, her hesitant smiles, or Lorenzo's soft coos. Those belonged to a chapter he'd closed. Occasionally he caught glimpses of gossip, rumors that Gavin and Eleanor had vanished, or that Colin might be angling for an even bigger position at a prestigious law firm. None of it felt real. He just worked, numb to possibilities outside his laser focus on success. That evening, at his downtown condominium, a sleek penthouse he rarely decorated, he found himself rifling through old paperwork. By sheer accident, he stumbled upon a photograph of him and Adriana at a sponsor event once. In it, Adriana glowed in a classy dress, while Joel hovered at her side, slightly awkward but smiling. He stared at it, remembering her soft laughter, how she used to gently tease him about being too serious. A distant ache flared. "You made your choice," he told himself, tucking the photo away. "She's not yours to miss." Yet that night, sleep eluded him. The city lights twinkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and Joel lay awake, haunted by the notion that despite everything he'd achieved, a hollow ring shaped his days. Joel had no way of knowing how quickly his life would spin again. 2 weeks later, just past midnight, he was jarred from half-sleep by frantic pounding on his condo door. His heart lurched. Few people knew his address here. He threw on a shirt and rushed to answer. He swung open the door to see Adriana Warren clutching a bundle in her arms. Lorenzo, her hair disheveled, mascara streaking her tear-stained cheeks. A livid bruise marred her left cheekbone, and her eyes darted wildly as though she expected someone to snatch her from behind. "Joel," she breathed, voice cracking. I had nowhere else to go." Shock rooted him for a beat. Then he ushered her in. "Oh my God, Adriana, what?" He stopped, noticing a small suitcase behind her. She stepped inside, trembling, struggling to soothe Lorenzo's whimpers. When she finally spoke, the story spilled out in ragged gasps. Colin had grown more dangerous over the last few months, verbal abuse escalating into physical violence, sometimes forcing her into unspeakable acts to entertain his friends. She described the final straw, a night of Colin coming home drunk, demanding she comply with his twisted desires alongside strangers. She grabbed Lorenzo and fled. Joel felt rage coil in his gut, a visceral urge to hunt Colin down, but first, he had Adriana to protect. "You're safe here," he murmured, guiding her to the couch. "Just breathe. I'm not letting anyone hurt you." She sobbed against his shoulder. Lorenzo pressed between them, wide-eyed but oddly quiet. Under the condo's subdued lighting, Joel saw faint bruises on Adriana's arms. The sight burned a hole in his chest. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice trembling, as if apologizing for showing up uninvited. "Don't be," he said firmly, stroking Lorenzo's hair. "I'm just glad you got out." A hush fell, broken only by the baby's occasional fuss. Joel retrieved an ice pack from the freezer, gently pressing it against Adriana's bruised face. She winced, tears slipping down her cheeks. I didn't know where else to go," she repeated hoarsely. "Dad's worthless in this. He kept saying not to create a scandal, so I was on my own. Colin threatened me if I tried to speak up." Joel's eyes flickered with anger. "He won't touch you again. I promise." Adriana relaxed a fraction, exhaustion dragging at her features. Joel showed her to a spare bedroom, bare but comfortable. She set Lorenzo in the small crib Joel hurriedly assembled from leftover baby items stored in his closet. Then she clung to Joel, fresh sobs racking her frame. "I'm sorry," she whispered again, "for leaving you before, for letting it get this far." All he could do was hold her gently, wishing he'd had some warning, some chance to intervene sooner. Eventually, she drifted into a fitful sleep. Joel remained awake, perched in a chair by the crib, vowing he would shield them from Colin's reach. Morning brought a grim clarity. Adriana's bruises looked worse under the daylight, her eye faintly swollen. Lorenzo clung to her anxiously, as though sensing her distress. Joel quietly brewed coffee, the scent mingling with the tension in the condo. They decided to call the police. Though Colin wielded influence as a rising attorney, they had to report the assault. Joel drove Adriana to the station. Lorenzo strapped into a car seat Joel borrowed from a neighbor last minute. The sun glared off the pavement, turning the city streets unforgiving. At the precinct, a weary detective took notes while Adriana recounted Colin's abuse. She quivered under the detective's questions, her cheeks burning with shame at the humiliating details. Joel stood by her side, fists clenched, longing to see Colin behind bars. But the detective's clipped tone suggested the legal road might be rocky. Colin's resources could muddy any case. Back at Joel's condo, they found a new calm. Miss Hartridge, once Adriana's nanny, arrived after an urgent call. She embraced Adriana with maternal warmth and took Lorenzo off her hands for a while, allowing Adriana to rest. Adriana and Joel quietly shared lunch at his small dining table takeout salads. The moment felt oddly domestic, sunlight filtering through the glass balcony doors. Yet each person carried scars invisible to the eye. "What will you do now?" Joel asked gently. "Go back to your father?" Adriana stared at the dressing on her salad. "He'll just tell me to hush it up again. I can't." "I refuse." She glanced at Joel, eyes glistening. "I'll find a place, eventually. For now, can I—" Joel reached for her hand. "Stay as long as you need." Relief shone on her face, but also something deeper: gratitude, maybe affection. Over the next days, she settled into a routine with Lorenzo at Joel's condo. Miss Hartridge helped care for the baby. Meanwhile, Adriana's presence stirred old warmth in Joel's chest. Their contract had once bound them artificially, but now an unspoken bond formed from shared pain and genuine concern. Judge Warren eventually called in a fury. Adriana took the call in hushed tones, tears streaking her cheeks afterward. "He blames you," she told Joel, voice wobbling. "Says you're seducing me away, making me disgrace the family. I told him I'm not going back." She paused. "I think for the first time I stood up to him." Joel's heart swelled with pride and worry. "That's huge, Adriana." She nodded, determination lighting her gaze. "I want to be here, with you, if you'll have me." Joel hesitated only a moment. "I'm here, and you're always welcome." The ghost of a smile curled her lips. Let them talk, Joel thought fiercely. She's safe. That's all that matters. Within a week, Colin Davenport made his move. A private investigator showed up at Joel's condo complex, snapping photos of Adriana and Lorenzo. Colin also sent veiled threats through texts, words like, "You can't hide her forever. You'll regret crossing me." Joel seethed, carefully documenting each threat. Late one evening, as Adriana played with Lorenzo in the living area, Joel received a call from a blocked number. A gravelly voice spoke, "Put Adriana on a plane back to me or else." Then a click. Joel recognized it as Colin's brand of intimidation. Enough was enough. He contacted his lawyer, who filed a restraining order, supplemented by the police reports of assault. The next morning, Colin made a public misstep attempting to confront Adriana outside a grocery store. She screamed. Bystanders intervened. Police arrived swiftly, discovering Colin in violation of the temporary protective order. He was arrested on the spot. In the subsequent weeks, Colin's legal empire collapsed. Judge Warren, feeling the heat of bad press, cut ties, claiming ignorance of Colin's abusive actions. Adriana, with Joel's support, pushed for a fast-track divorce. The family court hearing was tense. Colin still had money to hire a slick defense attorney, but overwhelming evidence of domestic violence tipped the scales in Adriana's favor. Joel stood by her side in the courthouse hallway. She clutched Lorenzo, wearing a simple dress that revealed faint bruising still healing on her arms. When the judge's final ruling granted Adriana full custody, she broke into relieved tears. Colin, pale and livid, stomped out, flanked by lawyers. Outside, reporters snapped photos, ignoring Joel and Adriana's pleas for privacy. "You're free," Joel murmured, guiding her away from the chaos. "It's over." She gazed at him. Lorenzo cuddled between them. "Because of you," she whispered. I'm finally free." They stepped into the brisk autumn air, a new chapter waiting. Joel recalled a time he once half-loved her under the weight of a fake marriage. Now everything felt redefined. No contract, no illusions, just two people who'd found each other again in the midst of heartbreak and danger. "Come on," he said softly, steering her toward his car. "Let's get you both home." The day closed with them back at Joel's condo, Miss Hartridge doting over Lorenzo, and Adriana curling up on the couch next to Joel. Outside the windows, city lights blinked like distant stars. Adriana tentatively laid her head on Joel's shoulder, and he let his arm slip around her, no pretense or legal agreement necessary. He breathed in the moment a fragile peace, an uncertain future, but a genuine closeness that surpassed their past arrangement. If she wants to stay by my side, I won't run from it, he thought, heart pounding softly. We can start fresh, unchained by contracts or fear. And so, Part 5 reached its close, with Colin stripped of his power, Adriana liberated from her nightmare, and Joel standing beside her, both finally free to choose each other of their own accord. A gentle autumn breeze blew through the open windows of Joel Price's condo, carrying the faint scent of fallen leaves. Joel stood in the kitchen, quietly washing dishes while Adriana and Miss Hartridge busied themselves in the living area with a babbling Lorenzo. Ever since Colin's defeat in court, life had settled into a supportive routine. Adriana and Lorenzo lived with Joel. Miss Hartridge helped with childcare. They'd all formed an odd but comforting little unit. Late that afternoon, the doorbell rang a sudden, frantic buzz that set Lorenzo squealing in surprise. Joel exchanged a puzzled glance with Adriana, then headed to the door. When he opened it, two anxious faces peered up at him, Della and Sybil, the teenage daughters of Eleanor. The sight jolted Joel's memory. He hadn't seen them since Eleanor vanished with Gavin, leaving only heartbreak behind. "Girls?" Joel said, heart pounding. "What? Come inside." Della clutched Sybil's hand, her eyes brimming with tears. Both looked weary, as though they'd been traveling for days. Adriana hurried over, gently guiding them to the couch. Miss Hartridge fetched water and blankets. Della inhaled a shaky breath. We ran away from Gavin. He's not the same anymore. Or maybe he never was." Joel felt a swirl of conflicting emotions. Concern, anger, a flicker of protectiveness. "Where's your mother?" he asked softly. Sybil sniffed, eyes round with fear. "She's in trouble," she whispered. "Gavin forced her into horrible things. Drugs, parties she kept calling us to say she'd come back soon, but it never happened." Della lowered her gaze, voice quivering. "He got her hooked on something. Forced her to prostitute herself for his deals. She's stuck in some house full of criminals." Tears sprang from her eyes. "We managed to slip away last night. We didn't know who else to call." Stunned silence gripped the condo. Adriana's hand flew to her mouth in horror. Joel's heart wrenched, remembering how Eleanor once seemed to yearn for stability and care. She must be trapped in a nightmare, he thought, dread and anger coalescing. Adriana, still holding Lorenzo, asked, "Where is she exactly?" "We only know it's in a rough part of town near the old factories," Della explained. "We overheard Gavin yelling about managing inventory like he was dealing more than just drugs." She hiccuped. "It's like a trafficking ring." Joel felt a surge of fury, recalling how Gavin had always taken what he wanted, heedless of who he hurt. "Stay here," he told the girls gently. "You're safe now. We'll figure this out." A few hours later, after the initial shock subsided, Joel and Adriana quietly set up temporary sleeping arrangements for Della and Sybil. Miss Hartridge helped them shower, eat, and rest. The girls, exhausted, collapsed on a fold-out bed in Joel's spare room, hands still clasped, as though afraid to be separated. When the morning light filtered in, the tension in the condo felt strangely mixed with a cautious sense of unity. Joel stepped onto the balcony, phone in hand, to call the police and share what he'd learned. Gavin's criminal involvement might be deeper than we knew. The detective he spoke to listened intently, promising to dispatch a small task force to investigate. Meanwhile, Adriana brewed fresh coffee, her eyes darting to the sleeping girls. "I can't believe this," she murmured to Joel when he re-entered. "It's horrifying that Gavin would go this far." Joel nodded, swallowing down a knot of guilt. "He's always been twisted, but I never imagined this." Adriana gently cupped his cheek. "It's not your fault, Joel. Gavin makes his own vile choices." They spent the day comforting Della and Sybil, who gradually opened up. Sybil described how Gavin dangled money and fake promises of a better life. Eleanor initially believed him, clinging to hope that she'd provide for her daughters. Soon, though, the deals Gavin wanted her to broker spiraled into forced prostitution, drug abuse, and intimidation. "She asked us to leave," Della whispered, tears trembling in her eyes. "Said it was safer for us, so we escaped while Gavin was out. But we can't just abandon her." Joel's chest tightened. We won't. Later, Miss Hartridge took the girls shopping for clothes. They'd fled with almost nothing. Adriana tidied the living room, tidying up scattered baby toys to make space. In a soft conversation on the couch, she expressed her gratitude. I used to think my problems with Colin were huge. But seeing what Eleanor's enduring, I can't stand by either. Joel nodded, warmth filling him at Adriana's resolve. We'll help Eleanor no matter what it takes. He also noticed how natural Adriana seemed in this caretaker role, coordinating tasks, comforting the frightened teens. She truly belongs here, Joel thought, an affectionate twinge fluttering in his chest. Since Colin's downfall, they'd tiptoed around labeling their relationship, but an unspoken closeness bound them. That evening, as Della and Sybil drifted off in the guest room, Joel quietly told Adriana, I'm not letting them go back to the streets. This can be their home until we find Eleanor. Adriana's eyes shone. We're making quite a family here, aren't we? You, me, Lorenzo, Miss Hartridge, these girls? He smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. I'm okay with that, as big and messy as it is. Police acted swiftly. With the testimony of Della and Sybil, plus Joel's statement about Gavin's past threats, authorities launched a sting operation in the old warehouse district. Over the course of a tense week, Joel anxiously awaited updates. The detective occasionally called, confirming they were closing in on Gavin's operation. Finally, late one night, Joel's phone buzzed. We've apprehended multiple suspects, including Gavin Price. We have Eleanor, too alive, in bad shape. We're taking her to the hospital. You should come down. Joel's heart pounded as he rushed out, Adriana quickly joining him. Missy. Hartridge stayed behind with Lorenzo and the teens, reassuring them. Joel drove through the dimly lit streets, headlights cutting across silent blocks. At the hospital, they found Eleanor in a guarded room, an IV in her arm, her skin pale, eyes sunken. She looked frail, haunted. Della and Sybil, who arrived with Miss Hartridge soon after, burst into tears upon seeing her. Joel approached her bedside cautiously. Eleanor, he murmured, voice trembling. You're safe now. She blinked groggily, recognition dawning. Joel, oh God. Her lips quivered. I never thought I'd see you again. Della and Sybil rushed to her side, sobbing with relief. Eleanor tried to raise her hand to stroke their hair, but faltered, coughing. Joel noticed a bandage on her forearm, track marks from repeated needle use. Rage coiled in his chest at Gavin. He did this to her. Gavin was arrested, but Joel yearned to see him punished to the fullest extent. A detective entered with a clipboard, explaining that Gavin faced charges for human trafficking, assault, and drug distribution. We have enough to keep him locked up for a long time, the detective said gravely. Thanks to your statements and the operation we ran. Eleanor let out a shaky breath, tears slipping down her cheeks. I was so stupid. I thought he'd give me stability for my girls. She squeezed Della's hand. I'm sorry. Della hugged her fiercely, voice breaking. Mom, I just want you back. Please don't blame yourself. Through the swirl of tears and relief, Joel quietly retreated to the hallway with Adriana. He exhaled, leaning against the wall, adrenaline still coursing. Adriana rested a gentle hand on his shoulder. It's over, she whispered. Gavin's done. He nodded, eyes shining with a mixture of anger, sadness, and gratitude. And Eleanor, she'll need rehab, therapy, but at least she's alive. They exchanged a long, meaningful look. This was the final shadow from Joel's old life. Gavin had once overshadowed everything, from Joel's family company to Eleanor's illusions. Now, with him behind bars, the horizon felt open for the first time in ages. 6 months passed. Eleanor recovered gradually at a local rehab center, supported by her daughters. Joel visited often, ensuring Della and Sybil had stable schooling and a small trust for living expenses. Eleanor, her eyes clearer each day, often apologized for betraying Joel's kindness. Joel always shook his head. You deserve a second chance, Eleanor, he'd say, voice kind. Focus on healing. That's all that matters. Meanwhile, Joel and Adriana continued building their life together. Lorenzo grew into a lively toddler, babbling words that delighted Miss Hartridge. Alfred, still frail from heart issues, surprised Joel by inviting him to dinner one evening, quietly admitting he was proud of how Joel rescued the Price construction firm. Beatrice beamed with motherly pride, and even Judge Warren, though still stiff, made half-hearted attempts to acknowledge Joel's place in Adriana's life. In late spring, Joel decided to propose. It happened on a calm Sunday morning. They were out for a walk in a botanical garden, Lorenzo toddling beside them. Adriana paused to admire a cluster of vibrant orchids, oblivious to Joel slipping a small ring box from his pocket. "Adriana," he murmured, heart pounding. She turned, eyebrows lifting at his nervous grin. He knelt, holding up a simple diamond ring that reflected the sunlight. "Will you marry me? For real this time, no contracts, no deals, just us and our family." Tears shimmered in Adriana's eyes as she laughed, half in disbelief, half in joy. "Yes, yes, Joel." She yanked him upright, hugging him so tightly Lorenzo squealed between their legs. The three of them giggled together in a picture of pure happiness. The wedding, a modest affair, took place a month later in Joel's newly renovated backyard. A white arch adorned with fresh flowers overlooked a small gathering. Iris, Beatrice, a frail but smiling Alfred, Miss Hartridge with Lorenzo in her arms, and even Judge Warren standing stoically in the shade, unable to fully withhold a grudging respect. Eleanor, newly out of rehab, stood with Della and Sybil, her face etched with gratitude. As Joel and Adriana exchanged heartfelt vows in the soft glow of afternoon light, everything else seemed to fade. The old pains, regrets, and betrayals dissolved in the joy of this genuine union. Adriana wore a simple lace gown that swayed in the gentle breeze. Joel donned a sharp navy suit. Both glowed with contentment that no contract could ever replicate. During the reception, more of a cozy gathering than a grand event, Adriana teared up, recalling the day they'd first met under dire circumstances. Joel gave a short speech thanking Aunt Marilyn for inspiring him to open his heart and lift others. Even Judge Warren raised a glass, offering a terse but sincere toast. At sunset, they all gathered for photos by a rose trellis. Joel momentarily closed his eyes, recalling the boy who once ran from a violent father in the rain. "I've come so far," he thought, marveling at the circle of family and friends around him. Adriana squeezed his hand, bringing him back to the present. In that final hush of twilight, Joel stared at his wife, truly his wife now, and his loved ones, feeling a surging warmth in his chest. The future beckoned, open, and promising. He pulled Adriana close, Lorenzo clapping his tiny hands, and pressed a light kiss to her hair. The next morning, Adriana found Joel in their backyard, gazing at an old picture of Aunt Marilyn's house on his phone. "Something on your mind?" she asked, slipping an arm around him. He smiled, shaking his head. "Just reminiscing." He kissed her cheek. "We had a rough path, but I wouldn't change it. It made us who we are." She snuggled closer, feeling the warmth of the rising sun. "I'm glad we finally chose each other free and clear." Joel nodded, contentment flooding his heart. There'd always be challenges, be it in business or family life, but the dark storms of the past had at last given way to a brilliant new dawn.